Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Jen, Itty, and Goldie, for so much that you've contributed to the success of these sessions. Tonight's event is taking place on the 15th of Av. This date is referred to in the Talmud as the most joyous day of the year. Its joy is all the more emphasized by it appearing on the Jewish calendar just a few days after the tragedy of Tisha B'Av. There's a rapid transition between pain, grief, and mourning, and celebration and joy. It was on this day that so many divisions and breakdowns in relationships were resolved. Relationships were also formed when young men and women found their soul mates. It is so appropriate that we continue our series relating to relationships on this auspicious date. It's my pleasure to welcome all our speakers, Sarah Hoffman, Pam Tudin, Goldie Plotkin, and Javi Brook, who will share tremendous strengths that can motivate us with fresh and new perspectives. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Fagi, and it's so nice to be back here, and it's so nice to see so many of you signing in once again. And I said it on the last webinar, and I'm going to say it again. I really just do want to take my hat off to all of you for signing in and making the time. We are all so inundated with content all day long. We Zoom exhausted, as we say. And I think it's just really commendable that everyone's taken the time out, instead of watching makeup tutorials or reading your novel or doing something just to really take your head off, you know, something light, to really take the time on personal growth and development and to join us tonight. And I assure you it will be worth it. We've got such a wonderful lineup of speakers as usual, and I really hope you all enjoy. So to start off, I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker. She's actually my business partner. We're launching something really exciting in the teen social media space, so stay tuned for that. And what we've done tonight is we've really collated a lot of all of your questions specifically to do with parenting, our parenting relationships. I think for all of us in lockdown, this is one of the relationships that's taken tremendous strain. We're wearing so many hats. We're working, we're parenting, we're wifing, we're doing everything, and there's no delineation between any of these roles. And it's really, I think now more than ever, been such a tough, challenging time to be a parent. So we've got this wonderful panel of experts tonight that will hopefully share their wisdom and give us hopefully some practical tips and insights into how we can manage our parenting relationships. So the first question that we had for Pam Tudin, who's a clinical psychologist, and she has expertise in child and adolescent psychology, is to do with what do we do when our children are mean? And I think it's something that a lot of us as parents cringe at, because it's not the values we want to teach our children. It's not something we're proud of, but at some point in all of our parenting careers, our children can be mean. And the question that we have for Pam, which, as I said, was solicited from all of you who attended previous webinars, was, it hurts me personally when my child is mean, and obviously it's not okay. How can I best deal with a child being mean? And I think social media, as I said, the area that Pam and I are working on specifically is a place that we see children being the meanest, because they can say things behind a screen that they simply wouldn't say to somebody's face. So Pam, tell us about dealing with mean children.
So lovely to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. As Sarah said, we're actually working together, and most days I see her with a tracksuit top on and no makeup, so she's absolutely right. We could have all been watching a makeup tutorial early, you know, and having some time off, so thank you. Sarah did actually give me the heads up this afternoon that this question was coming, so I took the time to actually prepare a little bit for it, and if you are okay with it, I'd love to share the screen. So are you fine with that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, lovely. So I don't know if you can all actually see the screen now. Is it showing nicely for everybody?
Yeah, just need to put it on, presenter mode.
Perfect. So I'm trying to get it there. Is it showing fine? All right, let's maybe begin. So what I was thinking was, first of all, whoever sent the question in, hats off to you, because whoever owns up that their children are mean. The first thing that we always say is it's everybody else's child. And I'd like to tell you as a psychologist, my child is never mean, but it's absolutely the furthest thing from the truth. All of our children can be mean. And I'm really only here tonight with a little bit more theory than anybody else, but very much on the journey with everybody. So whatever I'm going to say now, I hope, you know, said with humility and the understanding that I've been on the other side of this chair many, many times. So to begin with, I think what we have to understand around mean children is this underlying theme all the time is the pressure that the children are in and under, and what does it come from? So the first thing we have to ask is, especially as Jewish parents, is do we want our children to go to Mensa and be super smart and be those fantastic children that everyone talks about later on in life as super genius? Or are we trying to raise menschers? And I think, you know, it's easy to say, oh, we're trying to raise menschers, but there is the subliminal message all the time that we give them that we want them to be super perfect and high achieving. So I just want to hold that in mind. And with it has to come some sense of ownership, that we have to deal with mean kids even when they are our own. So what is a mean kid? A mean kid is very different to a bully. And you know, it's a term that we throw about so easily and so quickly these days, and kids get boxed into that label without us having any regard for how heavy it is to carry it. So really what we have to know is that sometimes when children do mean things unintentionally and maybe just once off, they are being rude. They might have had an argument with their mom on the way to school. They might have had a tiff with a friend the day before. They're being rude. When they do something unintentionally and more than once, yes, that's mean. And only when they do something with intention and you've asked them to stop, can we start thinking about children as being bullies. So how does the bullying actually happen? Okay, how does that meanness come about? So if we think about how girls interact, you know, if I see a woman standing in the queue at Zara, I might say to her, and I don't know her, you know, from a bar of soap, beautiful shoes, where did you get them? And we just kind of connect instantly over, you know, the latest pair of sandals. When I leave, I feel like I have created some connection, some sense of intimacy with her. For boys, it's completely different. It's not a face-to-face thing. They connect side by side. So when girls have these kinds of connections, they often share an intimacy, and very quickly they form dyads, and within those dyads, they form groups. And those groups act like little socialist groups. The girls have to all speak the same, say the same thing, wear the same bracelet, you have to have the same onesie, the pink hairband, and the pink hairband can be in today and tomorrow, you know, it has to be purple, and who changed the rule, no one really knows. But that's how girls operate. And what's so frightening about it is that they begin by sharing intimacies, or we begin by sharing intimacies about ourselves. But very quickly, those intimacies become about the sharing about other people. Did you see the shoes that she was wearing? Did you hear what she said to so-and-so? You know, we are renowned for being prone to lashon hara far more certainly than the men are. And with boys, it's different. They just, first of all, they have far fewer words than we do. So they don't use a lot of them, and they can kick a ball side by side for days on end. And if you ask my boys if they had a good time, you know, at a play date, and I say, what did you do? They can't really tell me. If you ask the girls, they can absolutely give you the words. So when you are in this clique, when you are wearing the wrong headband, you can be expelled instantly for no real reason. And with boys, the retention factor is there. They want to keep the child who they're going to target within their range so they can continue that process and show the hierarchy. And whereas with girls, it's about ousting them, excluding them, silently not, you know, approving of them with rolling of the eyes or looking the other way. There are those kinds of behaviors that we see in girls very quickly. So if we understand that, then we begin to know what it is we are dealing with. And now what I'd like to talk a bit about is who are we dealing with? So if we understand that there was a fantastic woman many years ago, she wrote a book called Queen Bees and Wannabes. Her name was Rosalind Wiseman, I think it was. And she said, there is the queen bee. And if we think about it in our own lives, all of us know who the queen bee is in our circle. And she is often that woman and that girl who rules with control, intimidation. She's usually the beautiful one, very charismatic, and often very, very clever. So she rules from far, because what she has is a little sidekick. And her sidekick is the girl who does all the dirty work for her. She is the girl who behaves in the mean way. So she is left to do the hard job on behalf of the queen bee. Then we get the banker, and the banker is the girl who will hold the information, take the secrets, get you to confide in her, and when the moment is right, she will dispel that information to the queen bee in a heartbeat. And all of these experiences accumulate for girls, and they start to feel those experiences as very mean and very bullying. We get the floater. The floater is the girl who can go from group to group and not really be particularly hurt when she gets ousted, because today she's got horse riding, and tomorrow if the horse riding girls don't like her, she can go to ballet and she's got a group of friends there. But there's also the weaker version of the floater, and that is the girl who struggles because she never quite fits into any of the groups. If we think about the torn bystander, say, the torn bystander is the girl who's caught in the middle, and she has an allegiance to the girl who's being the victim, who is experiencing being a victim. But she doesn't want to betray the queen bee because she's frightened to. And then ultimately, when she builds up the courage to say, you're being mean, that's not okay behavior, then what transpires is she gets ousted by the queen bee. So the torn bystander often gets punished for doing the right thing. Then we get the wannabe, who is the one who will do anything to please the queen bee, and obviously the target, who is the recipient. So why am I telling you all of these things? Because underneath all of this, anyone who knows me knows that I really believe in the practical skills that we need to change kids' lives, to manage some of this stuff. So going back to wanting them to be, be a mensch or be, in Mensa, we have to give our kids EQ skills to manage the dynamics that they are faced with every day. No child wakes up wanting to be a mean child. It is just a reflection of the fact that in that moment, they didn't have the EQ skills that they needed. So if we ask ourselves, what is this trendy term EQ? What is it actually? What is it? It's so easy to bandy this term about. And it boils down to understanding the question that we ask ourselves as parents and as husband and wife often. We are forever saying, I just want two things. I want my children to grow up to be happy, and we want them to have a good education so that they can go to university or college and make the right career choices. And those two things are often mutually exclusive because of the strain that kids are under. So let's pull the handbrake and ask ourselves how we go back to just creating children who have a capacity to be happy and build the skills in the moment that they need. Because what we know is that IQ is only the thing that gets you through the door, but EQ is the thing that will keep you there. So your child can be the smartest, your child can be the one who's achieving the highest, the child can be the one who's taking the most strain. But if they don't have the EQ skills, they are not going to sustain the relationships they need to be able to be those things that we hope for them. So let's try and understand what EQ actually is. So EQ, have I got time for this, or do you want me to pause for a bit?
I think we've got a little bit of time. I think you'd be leaving everybody hanging if we didn't hear a bit more about EQ.
Okay, so just to not hog the time, just to say that EQ is something that we have to understand as developing in 4 stages. And those 4 stages can be divided into, firstly, self-awareness, our ability to name our feelings as we experience them, then the ability to manage those feelings when we have them, finally, the ability to read the room, and that is to understand what other people are feeling, and then to know how to manage those feelings in other people when we see them. So if we know all our feelings, if we can get beyond mad, bad, sad, and glad, if we think particularly of boy children, as I was saying, they struggle even as adults to have the right words to express their feelings. So sometimes things just come out as mean. If I think of an example, my boys were once having an argument, and they were really, really cross with each other. And trying to give them the words, I said to the one, "You're feeling very, very cross." And he said, "I'm not cross, I flustated." And I thought to myself, hallelujah. Okay, as much as he was having a meltdown, as much as he wasn't coping, he's beginning to know the difference between the shades of mad, bad, sad, and glad. Then if you know you are frustrated, sometimes you need to have the ability to manage that frustration. Or if you know you are wanting money from a parent for extra pocket money, is this the right time to ask for it? When do you manage those feelings? So it's about the ability then to know your feeling, name that feeling, and manage it. And then say, okay, it's nearly Shabbos. Maybe now's not the right time to ask for extra pocket money because I can see my mom's running around like a chicken without a head. And, you know, she's going to need maybe a Sunday morning to answer this question in a better way. And then finally, what quadrant 4 is the ability to name your feelings, manage those feelings, know what other people are feeling, and then manage their feelings. So that is the child in the classroom who can say, okay, it's raining, why don't we all stay inside and play marbles? And everyone responds to that as leadership. And they go, great idea. The child who might be on the spectrum or who might have been mean to someone the day before will say the next day, let's stay in and play marbles. And everyone goes, are you crazy? The sun's shining, we're going outside. So quadrant 4 is an aspirational space, but it is something that we have to think about if we want our children to get beyond acting in relation to other people just in a reactive way, but rather in a proactive way. So EQ really then is about capitalizing on your strengths and knowing how to help children compensate for those areas that they feel like they're struggling in. And later on, if there's time, I'm very happy to go through, you know, some of the real practical ways that we can build skill in children to deal with meanness, how to deal with praise, how to deal with impulse control. You know, there's some really beautiful exercises that we can give our children to allay some of the meanness that we see. But I think just for the sake of this, this evening, I'd love to hear what everybody else has to say. I'm going to stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm so thrilled that I have a psychologist as my business partner, because when my little people grow up, I'm definitely coming to you for lots of advice on EQ. But I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Javi Brook. For those of you that don't know, we're actually going to be speaking to Javi a whole lot more next week. She's got the most fascinating story. Javi, I've been reading a little bit about you, and wow, you seem like a super woman. So I really look forward to hearing more in depth about your phenomenal story. But for tonight, we had a couple of specific questions also gathered from our various participants. And I just want to say, I'm just amazed. There are over 107 participants on this webinar tonight. And Fegi was saying at the beginning that she was a little bit worried because there are a bunch of concurrent webinars and she was worried that not too many people would sign in, but it's really fabulous to see so many of you signing in again. So Javi, you are a mother of 5 adopted children. How do you manage conflict when you and your husband perhaps have different views on how things should be handled, and specifically when you have not 1, not 2, not 3, but not 4, but 5 children to manage? Can you give us some examples of perhaps how you've dealt with conflict in your house from a parenting perspective specifically?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. Excuse me, lipstick on my teeth. So I feel like I'm on a panel with a lot of experts and amazing people with such wise information and expertise. Definitely not an expert, but I love to share and happy to share my experiences as being a mom of 5 and an adoptive mom. So how do we deal with conflict? I would like to say, what conflict? You know, I'm always right. But in all seriousness, communication, I've learned, is one of the most powerful tools in your toolbox. And I know it sounds like, of course, we all communicate. The trick is, how are you communicating? How are you getting your views across? How are you listening, right? Listening is a skill. We can listen, we can hear, or we can listen. And sometimes we listen to actually wait to give our opinion, or we actually are listening to what the other person is saying. So I've learned over the years to enhance these skills of communication and listening And what does that mean with a spouse when we have different views of parenting or even different backgrounds? Sometimes we just come to the table with how we were raised, and we don't know any different. And when you're now parenting as a partner and you're parenting 5 children with unique needs, with high needs, with different needs, sometimes it can get pretty touch and go. So one of the most amazing things my husband and I have done is, first of all, take care of our own mental health, which is through therapy. And I'm so glad that therapy has been less stigmatized over the years. I still think that in certain circles it still is. And I really, really believe that it is so powerful for your own self-character development. And in order to be able to communicate with somebody else and hear somebody else, you have to know who you are. And knowing who you are takes a lot of work. So that has kind of been our journey. And we have been able to listen. All jokes aside, we do have different views sometimes. We do have different approaches of what we think our children need. And the way we deal with that is coming to the table and saying, okay, this is what I strongly believe in. And then and then we hear out, like for me, I hear what my husband strongly believes in. And then we work out some kind of compromise, and we work out what we think in this scenario. We each advocate for our own opinion, and we figure out, in this case scenario, putting our own personal feelings aside, what is best for the child. And it's so important that we do present as a united front, because kids are super smart and they are amazing at splitting, which is, telling this one thing and that one thing, and finding the weak spot in every parent and how to get what they want. But on the other hand, showing a united front is very important, but it's also okay for kids to see that parents are also human. We also struggle. We also have to work through conflict. We also have to work through our communication. When you present as this perfect human being for your children, then they think that struggle is bad. And when they struggle, they don't have the tools to work through struggle. When you can show your kids that there is struggle, and that's okay. We can work through struggle. It's not scary. We don't run away from it. Sometimes Abba and Mommy don't agree on something, and we figure out and we come to the table and we work it out. Those are the most powerful skills that our children can see. And then when they're struggling, they're not like, oh my gosh, I've never seen struggle before, I'm going to fall apart. They know, oh, I know what this looks like. I know how to deal with this. So, that was a lot of information, a lot of broader kind of ideas on how to deal with conflict, but really those are the tools that I use. And, as specific examples, I mean, we have these struggles multiple times a day, and now, to make it really timely and personal, like we live in Bozeman, Montana, and our school just announced that they're only doing like part-time school. So if your name is, in this part of the alphabet, you're having school on Monday and Tuesday. And if you're in this part of the alphabet, and we are freaking out, and our kids really need school and they really need structure. And now, I think we should do this, and my husband thinks maybe we should do this, and maybe we should sign them up for a private school, or maybe we need a tutor, or and we are throwing out all these different ideas out on the table. But what comes down to it is, how are we going to communicate this? How are we going to come together? How are we going to put out all the options on the table and come to a decision that both of us feel comfortable with, respectfully? That's what I got.
Thank you, Javi. And the next question, I think, is just so pertinent to, well, being a parent, but especially being a parent in lockdown. And as you probably know, in South Africa, most of us are in quite a restrictive level of lockdown still. And the question that we got for you is, what do you do when all of your kids are yelling mom, mom, mom at the same time? I mean, I struggle with 2 of them saying mom, so I would imagine 5 is infinitely more. So how do you deal with that?
Oh my gosh. Sometimes better than others. Sometimes I'm just like, I want to just hide under my covers and not listen to anybody. Someday, that's just a feeling that I have inside of me. I don't usually actually get to do that. But I just, a quick joke, my grandmother, who passed away a couple years ago, she had a bunch of boys in a row, and she was a little bit hard of hearing even as a young age. So she had hearing aids. and boys are really not loud. So she always used to tell me, she would turn off the hearing aids and she wouldn't hear anything. And her kids would be like flying around and fighting and whatever, and she would be fine because she didn't hear anything. I thought that is just so brilliant. So how do you deal with everyone saying mom at the same time? Sometimes I actually tell my kids, I'm like, I want to see if for 5 minutes nobody can say mom. It hasn't worked. It never works. So, I really think that this time is so what's the word I'm looking for? So uncharted. We are in a time where we've never had to deal with before, and we are all trying to muddle through and figure it out. And we are all doing the best we can. My favorite parenting phrase that I carry around with me, my mantra, is at any given moment, we're all doing the best we can, and we can do better. So it's so true. We're always, as moms, we are doing the best we can, and there's always things to strive to and better to do. So sometimes when they're all screaming mom, I'm like, everybody be quiet. Like, I can't do this. And sometimes I'm like, okay, kids, one at a time. What would you like to say? And what would you like to say? And what would you like to say? And let's sit down and let's talk about all the things you have to say together. And other days I'm just like, I can't, I'm out of here. I can't hear mom one more time. So I really just feel like I don't have any magic answers of like, oh my gosh, I've got this figured out. I do not have this figured out. I am muddling through this as much as you are. I am muddling through the time of our kids not having structure, our kids not having school. So yes, kids always say mom, 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 but it's very different when they're home 24/7. You usually get a couple hours break to like regroup and get yourself, like, do you ever put on your game face when your kid's coming home from school and you're like, okay, I got this. Like, they're all coming in the door. They're all going to say mom at the same time. They're all going to need me. And during that time, I'm like, okay, I can be prepared. I have snacks set out. I know what I know the first thing they're going to want to do is eat. And I know the first thing they want to do is all tell me about their day and all tell me all the horrible things that happen to them. And so I can handle that because I geared myself up for that. But now when it's all day, all the time, every day, and the kids are getting on each other's nerves because they don't have a break from each other. And so I'm finding that my kids are fighting more and they're just constantly, on edge. And so answering those mom questions all the time, sometimes we can do it and sometimes we can't. And I really feel like we need to be okay with that. We need to be okay with not being able to do everything 100% all the time. So I don't really feel like I answered this question perfectly because I really don't have a magic answer of how to deal with all the moms. My answer is do the best you can. Sometimes another thing is that I say is from my mother is, okay, complaint department is closed. Like, you had 20 minutes to tell me all the horrible things that happened to you, and now we're taking a break. So come up with your little slogans, your little coping. Can you hear me? I was muted by mistake. And then go with that and just keep in the back of your head, I am doing the best I can. And sometimes I can listen to all of you at once and sometimes I can't. And we're just doing the best.
Javi, thank you. I absolutely love that answer. I think it's just so real and so authentic, and I think it resonates with so many of us. And firstly, I think your gran is an absolute legend.
Wasn't that amazing? I'm like, sometimes
I love hearing your story. It's a pity we can't all use it, but I'll try and remember it for one day when I do have hearing aids.
Exactly.
But I think what you're saying just resonates with so many of us. My version of that is I just sometimes wished I just had a remote that muted the whole scene, paused it, let you read for a few minutes, and then you can carry on. But as you said, we are in such uncharted territory, and I think that's such a helpful mantra to really try and remember. We're doing the best we can, but we can do better, because I think, especially as women, we hold ourselves to such a high standard of excellence all the time. And I think if we don't start being a little bit kinder to ourselves, we all going to, it's really, really tough. So.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you. I really, really love that. And also I love the complaints department is closed. I'm definitely going to be using that. related to that question, Javi, and maybe this isn't a question for lockdown, but maybe a question for just general times, is how do you manage to give each of your 5 children individual quality time? And I'm going to add on my own addition to that is, if you do, how much would you say is enough? I did a parenting course last year, and the woman who gave the course was really outstanding. She gave really practical tips, and she said her message to us was really, it's not about how much time you give the children, it's really about the quality of time. And she said it could be as little as 10 minutes a day, as long as it's phone away, focused time, real, really being present with your child. So how do you manage that?
So actually, I 100% agree with whoever gave you that parenting course. I have, as I've said, my kids are very high needs. They have a lot of unique needs coming from trauma background, or dealing with attachment, or dealing with, a lot of different mental health or actual physical health concerns. So there's a lot going on in my house, and I have a lot of different opportunities to talk to and have involved in our family, different therapists, different support systems. And I've learned a lot over the years, and I've tried a lot of different things. And, as your family grows, it gets harder and harder to provide that. When you have one child, great, they're getting the quality time all the time, and then you have 2, and then, it starts to grow, and then you have an age range, like my oldest is 16 and my youngest is almost 3. And that's, they have such different needs. And so to try to balance that out at all times and give everyone what they need can be really overwhelming. So one of the most recent things that we've been doing, which I've really found success in, is my son in particular had some really serious behavioral, challenges, and we were trying everything under the book. And I came across this therapy that was a play therapy, but a parent-led play therapy, and very, very ties into what you just said. And what it was is giving your child 10 minutes, like you said, quality versus quantity. 10 minutes every day to be just with that child and to give them your undivided attention. But furthermore, it was child-led. So the child got to decide what was going to be done in those 10 minutes. And it had to be something that was interactive, something that, that included you. They couldn't just say, I'm going to read a book by myself, So that, I found that to be really revolutionary, because if you're honing in on that child for 10 minutes and they get to lead the play, and they get to kind of guide you on and then they also taught you the feedback that you need to give them, almost be like a narrator, like, oh, now we're doing this and now we're doing that. Oh, I see that you put this big, whatever. And you are so involved in them in that moment. What that does for their self-esteem and their attention is amazing, because what's the reason why a child misbehaves is usually because they are trying to get your attention. And a child doesn't differentiate between positive or negative attention. As long as they get the attention, they're getting their needs met. Now, it's not a healthy way to get their needs met, but if they're going to throw a cup full of water across the room, they're going to get your attention. And they're not necessarily getting your attention when they're sitting nicely at the table, right? You don't necessarily call them out on that. They're, so obviously catching them when they're good is also a really good, idea. But this way, they're getting filled up with this attention that hopefully will help manage their behaviors throughout the day. So we started this with my son, and I noticed that it was, didn't magically cure all his, challenges, but it really did make a difference. And I tried to implement that with all my kids, and tried to give them, so with this one particular child, we have to do it a little bit more often, but let's say even once a week, you give your child 10 to 15 minutes of undivided attention where they get to choose what they're going to do with you. I think that's super powerful. Now, on the same vein as before, we're human, and some days and sometimes we just don't have the capacity for it. So we don't always get to all of our kids and get undivided attention for all of them. But I think having this in the back of your mind and having the tools, like if you can see, even if it's not a regular thing that you're doing, but if you notice that one of your children is struggling in school or struggling socially or coming home and just is sad every day, maybe that's a time to pull that tool out of the toolbox and say, you know what? I think you need a mother-daughter date. Let's go get manicures together. or, you know what, let's go, you know, we live in Montana, we have nowhere to go out to eat, or, you know, we don't really have much to do. Let's go on a hike together. Let's, you know, so you start to hone in, you don't need to necessarily do it all the time. Obviously, in an ideal world, every kid's getting their individual attention once a week. Amazing. But if that's not possible for you in this moment, in this time, you start to notice which kid is asking for it, which kid is needing that extra special attention, and then that's the kid that's going to get it for that week. And so I've gone through stages where I'm super good about it, and I can give them, you know, I have a schedule and they're each getting their undivided attention at one point, and then I have months that go by that I'm like, I'm barely managing the day-to-day, like, get them fed, get them bathed, get them ready for school, get that, you know, all the basic needs is already putting me up to here. So then, no, I'm not going to be giving them undivided attention, each one every week, because that's just not in my capacity. So I hope that, you know, don't beat yourself, like, again, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up when you're not giving your kids, you know, what you think, you know, is ideal. Put on your little detective hat and be smart and say, okay, which one of my children are needing it the most right now? And that's a way that you can just manage when it's just too much to do it all. So that's my little thought.
Thank you so much, Javi. I think that's really practical, manageable advice, especially when you've
all about trying to survive. Listen, it's all about managing, and, you know, like you said, we really, as moms, we hold ourselves to such a high standard. And part of my therapeutic process has been, I've got to be a little kinder to myself. I've got to understand that I'm also human. I also have to take care of myself, because if my bucket gets empty, I have nothing to share. So it's been a really big work in progress for me to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. I'm being kind to myself. I'm understanding that I'm not perfect. I'm going to be doing the best that I can. And that actually is the best thing that you can do for your child, because then they get all of you, they get the authentic you, they get the you that's taking care of themselves. They don't, you know, one of the worst things that, you know, that can happen sometimes is when our kids start to feel that they have to take care of us because we're not taking care of ourselves. And that's a huge burden that shouldn't be put on them. When they start to feel like, oh my gosh, my mom's falling apart, like I need to be good, or I need to behave because my mom can't handle it. That's a huge burden to put on a child, too much. So it's our responsibility to take care of ourselves so we can take care of our little humans, and that's what they deserve. So be kind to yourself, be smart about how you use your time, you know, and everyone just keep on doing the best they can. And, you know, our kids will see that.
Thanks, Javi. I think that's so valuable. And I think Goldie's mentioned it in one of our previous webinars, that sometimes as women, we feel guilty actually taking time out and looking out for ourselves and caring for ourselves.
Right? The culture is don't take care of yourself, right?
Absolutely. And I think we really do have to remember that we need to do that, to wear the various hats that we wear in running the home and being a wife and being a mother. If we don't look after ourselves, then it all can come crumbling down. So I think we have to always remind ourselves to do that. So Javi, I understand that you have to run off. You have 5 people to take care of.
Yeah.
Actually 7, including your husband and yourself, because you have to look after yourself
That's
too.
right. That's
So, but we look forward to hearing from you same time next week. We'll be sending out the details when we'll be hearing a lot more from Javi, and we'll hopefully have the opportunity for Q&A with you. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing and seeing you again this time next week.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And I learned so much from Pat. Is that her name?
Pam.
Pam.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I was like, ooh, this is good stuff. So thank you, and we'll see you next week. Have a nice day, and thank you so much.
Great. But for those of you that are still here, do not run away. We've still got lots of exciting stuff to talk about. I just did want to mention, we should have mentioned this at the beginning, that tonight's session is actually in memory of Naftali ben Shmuel, and also for Refuah Shalema for Sarah Leah Bat Hinda Esther. So if you can just keep those names in mind as we continue through tonight's session. So we're thrilled to welcome back for a third session due to absolutely popular demand. She's become a great friend of the Jewish Torah Institute and the Great Park community and the South African Jewish community. Goldie Plotkin. Goldie, it's so wonderful to have you back. Clearly, we can't get enough of you. So thank you for making time once again. And Goldie, we've been talking a lot about parents this evening, our parenting relationships, how we manage the various dynamics of parenting. It's no small topic, but I think that we've had some incredible insights so far. And I wanted to segue into how our relationships with our spouse affect our parenting, especially in this unprecedented time. I'm so tired of saying the new normal because there's nothing normal about it. I like to call it the new abnormal. But I think where so many of us are, especially in South Africa, we're in month 5. It feels like month 500 of very restrictive lockdown. We've been cooped up together. We are spending more time that is natural or normal with the people we love the most, but it's not natural to be on top of each other for this amount of time and this kind of intensity of time. Goldie, how do we not kill our husbands? Let's just call a spade a spade. How do we, but in all seriousness, how can you give us some practical advice of how do we manage these extraordinary times with, the people we love without biting each other's heads off, without, still nurturing our relationships, but it's really a lot of strain on even the strongest of relationships. Can you share some insights on that?
So it's interesting, as Fegi said, first of all, thank you for having me back. It's wonderful to be with my South African friends in South Africa. As you know, I have probably 1,000 South African friends here in Toronto. So tonight is Tu B'Av, and Tu B'Av is all about, well, it's the love, the Jewish love fest, right? The Jewish Valentine's Day. And clearly, I believe that the basis of a very, very good, solid raising of children, as Pam has alluded to, and as Javi, is when the parents, who are the Ikar, the Akeret HaBayis, when they have the strong foundation, no matter what storm weathers, they'll be able to handle that storm because they have a very strong foundation. And it's not just that our children are struggling now, they're watching how we are struggling and how we're dealing with it. So I feel like when we go back to who we are and what is the basis of our foundation, is the foundation just, let's start with the 3 little pigs. Is it made out of straw? Is it made out of brick? What is our home base? If it's based on the values of Torah, which is that we are, as I mentioned already in the last few classes, that we are a unit. We are one body fused with 2 souls. As Adam and Chava were one body, they were the androgynous being. Today, maybe we look like we have 2 bodies, right? We have the male and the female, but we really started out as one. And before we came down, we were one neshama. And as our souls split and came down to this earth, we had to find our soulmate to fuse and become one. If we can keep reminding ourselves, we are soulmates, we are one, be kind. It's like, for example, if my hand hurt, if my right hand is hurting, my left hand would not smack it or hurt it because it's my hand. If my toe has an infection, I will run to anywhere I can to find the right cure because my whole body is in pain because of one toe infection. If we can look at our spouse as part of our being, part of our essence, we will view our spouse in a whole different light, with more patience, with more love, with more admiration, with more forgiveness. So it goes back to, as we spoke about last time, Sarah, it's about how do we view ourselves? This is just man fell in love with woman, and if it works, great, and if not, boom, disposable society we get rid of and get the next version. God forbid. We know in the Jewish faith that we do believe in divorce because it's part of our tradition. It's one of the mitzvot. There is a whole Beth Din that deals with divorce. There are some times where it's actually healthy to get divorced, because if you're in a very abusive relationship, or sexual, emotional, verbal, you have to go. But there are so many times where it's just the small things and people are so quick to dissolve. So it's not the little things, Sarah, like, oh, did you put your socks over here? Why did you put the toilet seat down again or keep it up again? It's not because those are not really the main reasons why couples get angry or agitated. It's more the underlying. How are we viewing each other? Do I care enough about this relationship that I will find out how to make it work? Last time that we were on, you had an incredible psychologist or therapist, and she alluded to a very, very strong and prominent doctor by the name of Dr. John Gottman, who, by the way, brilliant guy. I don't know, Pam, have you ever heard of him? Dr. John Gottman? I love him. Did you know that he's a religious guy, and in all his lectures, he's always wearing that kippah? And if you look into his theories, you'll understand why he's one of the most brilliant marital therapists today around, because he brings so much Torah and so much Jewish values into his methods. And one of his great books that I really share with a lot of my friends is The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work. And one of the things he talks about on how to making a good marriage, especially now in COVID, is about realizing that you have to spend time enhancing your love maps. So what Javi so adorably spoke about, I think I'm going to join you next week if that's okay. Javi spoke about taking care of yourself and getting time to take care of your children. He speaks a lot about the love maps, taking the time to know your spouse. So when we're in this COVID time, you think, oh, it's terrible, it's 5 months together with everyone in the same house, and this is becoming so impossible and so challenging. But you can look at it the other way. We now had 5 months of opportunities of learning about our spouse. People are running out. There's no bar mitzvahs, there's no weddings, there's no social gatherings. We're forced to be with our spouse. Well, hello. How about dating again? Getting to know each other, learning about what your husband likes, what he dislikes, what he's scared of, what he's proud of, his thoughts and wishes, his goals for the next 10 years. I mean, these are sometimes things that we speak about when we're dating. We speak about the first year of our marriage, then the children come, and everything else is revolving around our children. No way. If you remember, I spoke about when Zalmi was born, my special 8th child. One of the things that I spoke about when they handed me my son and they said those medical terms, trisomy 21, and I had to pull out a dictionary to figure out what that was. When we figured out and we knew that Zalmi was Down syndrome, I remember saying to my husband, we must make a promise to each other that now that we have 8 children and one is a special needs child and it's going to take up a lot of our time, we can never, ever lose that oneness that you and I have been working on and that we've constantly been trying to solidify. Because I don't know if you know this, but 85% of families that have a special need child end up in a divorce. That is tragic. But being a mother of a special needs child, I can tell you that I can't see why that happens. You end up devoting all your time, your energy, and so much of your resources to taking care of that child. There's nothing left to take care of the two of you, and you become depleted. And then who is the first one to be hurt? Your spouse. They bear the brunt of everything. How not fear is that. We made a decision right there in North York General Hospital. We are not putting ourselves on the second burner. Our marriage is first. And the analogy of when you're on the plane and they throw down that mask and they tell you to put it on yourself first before you help the one next to you, it rings so true today in our homes during Corona. You have to fill up your love tank, spend time together. If it means going for a walk outside, I don't know if you're allowed to do that in South Africa now, I don't know if it's your lockdown, but sit outside in your backyard, make yourself a drink, whether it's wine or a coffee, whatever it is. Go out on dates, fill yourself up, because your love is going to sustain the rest of what Pam and Javi told you about. If you don't have your love tank full, you can't even attempt to take care of your 2 children or your 5 children.
Thanks, Goldie. I think that those are such relevant words, and I think words that we often forget about. It's the same, I think in the same space as self-care, we often neglect to nurture the relationships closest to us, and we really do have to have people like you who so eloquently remind us that that is really the foundation for all the other relationships in our home, that we have to really put that relationship first. So thank you for that really powerful reminder. Goldie, we have a question specifically for you, and this is really for, I suppose, parents with slightly older children. So this mother was asking about her daughter's choice in husband, and she said that she's really, really disappointed in the choice her married daughter is making. She's too young to realize any major negative ramifications if she goes ahead with her decisions. I'm so worried. What can I do? Goldie, what advice would you give to a mother in this type of situation? I'm sure it's not the first worried Jewish mother who's come to you with this type of predicament.
Okay, that's a fully loaded question. And one of the things I wanted to mention, and I might have mentioned it earlier, I don't know how many of your viewers know the concept of mashpia. Have you ever heard that concept before, Sarah? It's a mentor. When we were teenagers, and we were still in high school, the Rebbe, always came out with new ideas, new mivtzayim, new teachings, new goals. And that year when I was about 16, I remember it so clearly because the Rebbe told us each to get our own mashpia, to get your own mentor. Now, how many teenagers today have a mentor? I mean, they'll speak to their mother, they'll speak to their dad, but they confide in their girlfriends. That's not what a mashpia is. A mashpia is a mentor, someone that you look up to. So it can't be your parent, but it can be an aunt or one of your teachers in school that you respect, someone that gives you really good guidelines. I believe that at that age, I felt very uncomfortable. Who am I going to share that? Which I ended up finding a cousin who was much older than me. By the way, at that point, I was 16, she was 19, but I thought she was like 40 years older than me. And she still today is my mashpia. Everyone needs a mashpia, no matter how old you are. If you're 55, you need a mashpia, because there are always things in life that we need to be able to help us to see things more objectively. The daughter is clearly doing something that she feels is in her best interest, and probably she feels like this is the guy of her dreams, the guy that will make her happy, but she's young and she needs a mashpia. At this point, she should speak to her parents, but if she doesn't have that relationship, I would recommend your parents set her up with a Rebbitzin, not just a therapist, because I find, and I don't need this in any, God forbid, in any disrespectful way, but I feel that a therapist that has Torah values will give a girl the insight that will be a lot more long-term than now. Does he make you feel good? Is he going to support you? There's so much more that a woman has to look for when she's deciding on her bashert. And what I would recommend for this mother to do is, if she has a good relationship with her daughter, if she can sit down with her and say, let's write down some of the things that are important values for a husband. And this girl doesn't have to talk about this guy specifically, but she has to look at her father or some other very important men in her life. that she has admired. And she should put down these values on paper. And then she has to be able to speak with her mom or a mashpia or her father perhaps and say, these are the things that I want in a husband. I wonder if this man or this boy has these traits. Is he calm? Is he considerate? Does he have a temper? Is he caring? Is he intelligent? Is he able to support us? Does he have goals, spiritual goals, financial goals? Does he know how to does he have a good relationship with his parents? Does he himself have teachers or mentors that he looks up to? These are very long-term goals, but sometimes when a girl's in the moment, is he cute? Is he funny? Is he smart? Is he handsome? Is he, popular? These might not be the best goals and the best realities for a spouse. So to the woman who's asking the question, she has to sit down and make a concrete list of values that this girl's looking for in her husband, and then measure it up if this young man has what she feels are good credentials for being a good husband, a good father.
Thank you for that, Goldie. I think it's really such a tricky predicament to be in. Pam, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
I was just listening to both of you, and I was just thinking that maybe something that we also need to really think about are the things that trigger us, both in our children and in our spouses. I think there's a place for really owning honestly that, yes, the left hand shouldn't hit the right hand, but sometimes the left hand really itches the right hand in quite a frustrating way. And if we can own, that there are parts of our children that might remind us of a father that wasn't so loving, or, that we can acknowledge that we don't have to have the perfect package. And when we don't have the perfect package and we're okay with that, then we're not going to all the time have to respond to it. It's about understanding what our 8 out of 10 is and knowing how to live with the 2 out of 10 that really, really, really doesn't sit well with us. I think in terms of children who might, if we know their temperament, for example, some children are really great in the morning, some aren't. And if you're a morning person and you have a child who isn't, that's a real struggle, and vice versa. I've had to, for example, learn to really trust my one child to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do what he has to do to be ready for school. Because when he is in the afternoon and evening, that's not his time for being creative or writing a beautiful essay or even feeling like doing it. So instead of hounding him all the time when that hand of mine is really itching because he's not doing it my way, I've had to surrender. So I think there is something to be said for allowing imperfection as opposed to loving imperfection all the time. We are not loving all the time, and we can't be. And if we just find that way of saying, this is the 2 out of 10 that I'm not so fond of, that I can maybe walk away from today because it's easier than having the confrontation, when there's recognition. And I think that Javi spoke to that earlier, that consciousness that we need to have in relationships, whether it's our spouse or our child, and equally ourselves. I was thinking, before menopause hit, how I used to go to the mikveh, and sometimes I'd be like, oh, I just don't have the energy to go today. Like, really what I'd like to do is be under my duvet and read a book, and going to the mikveh has huge implications for what happens after the mikveh. You sometimes don't feel like that part either. So I think it's about owning our own imperfection, our own slothfulness sometimes, all of that aspect, and then being able to really feel the love. Because then it's proper love, when you love the imperfection as well, and we don't try and keep changing it.
Pam, I wanted to add on to what you were saying. One of the things also that John Gottman believes a lot, and I feel it's so important in a marriage, and maybe you can tell this, Sarah, to the mom, when a couple has shared meaning, in one of the ways that we value a marriage is when we have that shared meaning. We have same values, and you have the same similar goals. And I think when a couple can realize that they're shooting for the same star, although they're doing it in a different way, but they have the same goals, It allows for a lot more, understanding, like you were saying, Pam, a lot more the understanding, but you also are able to look away at small little things that bother you because the greater goal is so important and you both are sharing that and you're both looking forward to the same goal. So that shared meaning of finding the values, and if this couple has that, if they have direction they're both going to, they both have the same goals, whether it's a home of guests or a home for children or a Shabbat home or a home of taking care of Tikkun Olam or different, something together, and they're on the same track together. So all the little bumps along the way will just be that, just a bump. But your goal is so similar and so together that you'll be able to manage. And I like that, Pam, the 8 out of 10. I really like that.
Thanks to both of you. Did you want to say something, Pam?
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
Thank you, Goldie. Thank you for that. I was just thinking that, often we do have those greater goals in mind, but what we want on a day-to-day basis, especially as women, is communication. And I can't tell you how often, and I include myself in this, I think I just wish he'd talk more or engage more, whether it's our children or our husband, and that builds on the EQ stuff I was talking about earlier. So how do we get that communication? And I think sometimes it comes from really knowing how to ask the right questions. So with our kids, the worst question you can ask a child, how was school? School can only be 2 things, fine or terrible. You're never going to get more out of a child when you ask that question. But if you say, tell me the worst thing that happened today, tell me the funniest thing that happened today. Who was the person the second person who took leadership? I'm not so interested in the first person. What did the second person do? What made you want to follow them? Those kinds of questions. And equally with our husbands, if I say to him, how was your day? Yeah, good. If I say to him, what was frustrating today? What got in the way? Those things make for communication. So I think we have to just, yes, have this beautiful spearhead of a value system, but the foundation to that has to come through everyday building. And that's where the hard work is, It's so easy to get tired in that space and to have expectation that can never be filled. But if we go in light, if we ask the questions, if we don't get, kind of all hurt and indignant when we don't get as much or as many words back as we would like, I think those are the foundation spaces.
Thank you, both of those. So I think we're hearing a lot about expectation management and just the importance of asking the right questions. I think as women specifically, we really get fed up very quickly when we don't hear what we want to hear. But I think, as Pam was saying, with a little bit of gentle prodding, we actually can hear it. We just need to know how to ask those appropriate questions. So Pam, while you're here, I actually wanted to this question, and I think it's again so pertinent to lockdown. I wanted to ask this specifically to you. Actually, there's 2 questions and they're pretty similar, so I'm going to merge them. So the first was, this mom says, I'm working from home. I try to differentiate between my work time and my kids' time, but the kids still come to talk to me or ask questions, even when I'm in the middle of Zoom. I think you know that scenario. I don't think I speak to Pam for meetings almost every day. She's my business partner, and I don't think we've had one uninterrupted meeting without somebody asking me to come to the toilet or to give them a snack or to, how it goes. I think this is a very familiar scenario for anyone working from home right now. So this mom is saying she just can't give attention to her kids. How can she manage this? How can she respond to her kids when she's in the middle of a very urgent meeting? And then the second question, and I think they do kind of belong together, is really to do with young kids at home, also during this time, and giving them incentives. So it says, this woman has said, having the kids at home all day has its own kinds of challenges, and I find with the younger kids that incentives help motivate them to do what they need to do. Do you have thoughts on the goods and bads of incentives? What should I do or not do? I know this is probably another hour session, but if you could give us some high-level pointers from your professional perspective, that would be brilliant.
Sure. So I'm going to answer I don't know whether to go for the first one first, but what's top of mind is a friend of mine was telling me the other day that she knows somebody who works from home, and he's got a blue carpet on the one side of his table and a red carpet on the other side. And when he's on the red carpet, the children have to know that he's working and they can't interrupt. And when he's on the blue, then we're having dinner. So I thought to myself, that's lovely in theory. I'm not so, as Sarah knows, I'm not so sure my children would respond to that so willingly. But it is again about helping them to understand why we are working. What is it, for example, that they're hoping for? Maybe it's a new bike. So if you can let me work for a little bit, this is going towards your new bike. Or, sometimes we just have to work really hard, and it goes to the aspect of EQ around frustration tolerance and impulse control. So there was an amazing study done many thousands of moons ago where they gave children one marshmallow, and they said to them, if you can hold out and you don't eat this marshmallow now, and you can wait until, break time, you can have the whole packet. And what they found was the kids who could handbrake and managed to wait were the kids in later life who had the highest EQ, because frustration tolerance is the most significantly correlated aspect of building EQ. So there are children who don't like marshmallows. It's a metaphor. What am I trying to say? We have to find what our children's currency is. So if you're, at one stage when my boys were little, who held the remote control? Who was going to turn off the TV when it was time to turn off the TV? And they, would ache to get to that moment where they could push the button. And I would say to my one son, Nadav, I'd say, if you manage not to push the button and you can give it to your brother to do, we're going to have some special time, which leads to the second part of the question. So I found his currency, number one, because that was the thing that he needed to build frustration tolerance around. And number two was not to give incentive around stuff, because it's a one-way ticket to hell. Today it's a sucker and tomorrow it's an iPad. So the external motivation and reward system is something that I always struggle with. I think that star charts and all of those things take that locus of control and they make it outside of you. But when you can build that locus of control internally in the child, and you say, gee, you managed not to hit the remote control, doesn't that feel awesome? Maybe in the beginning, they're going to say to you, I don't care, that doesn't matter, it's not. But what they know is that you know that they did it. And you are affirming them for having that sense inside them, that ability to pause. So I think that, point out what it is that you're working for. Help them to understand that they, within their currency, what is the reward system that would work best for them once they have learned in their currency to achieve that. So, special time alone is the best reward you can give any child, as Kavi was saying earlier. And, even if it just means like we're going to go and have a milkshake together, it's the oldest cliche in the book, but it really, whatever the milkshake is for your child, it might be building a boring Lego avatar for 3 hours. Suck it up, because that is where they are at. And then they will really begin to realize that you mean it when you say that you're incentivizing them, because what they're going to get is you plus the thing that matters to them. And that combination is like, it's like giving them liquid chocolate on a Tuesday morning in their lunchbox, because it doesn't get better than that. So I think it's just about really being careful not to over incentivize with things, helping them to understand, build in that handbrake, and know that frustration tolerance is very, very significantly linked to building EQ.
Thanks for that, Pam. And I think that's such valuable advice. I think we, as parents, we all get caught up in everything that's gone on around us, and we actually forget, as you say, that the most important currency for kids is that focused, present time. And I think it's something we always need to be reminded of. We've got time for just one last question, and I have a question specifically for you, Goldie. It was following what you were speaking about earlier about having special date time with our spouses, even in lockdown. And this person says, what if your spouse isn't open to dates because they are stuck in their own stress? Sometimes people are so immersed in stress that they almost seem, I suppose, impenetrable in that headspace. What would your advice to this person be?
So I'm sure, again, you must have heard of this book, Pam, The 5 Love Languages with Dr. Gary Chapman. And I feel that there are some, have you heard of the book, Sarah? Okay, so the philosophy of his book, which is very important, from parent to child and from husband to wife, it's really a theory that goes across the board. We communicate in different ways. And so for the wife who desperately needs quality time, which is the reason why I've said that, is because that's my love language. So I need quality time. And as a mother of 8 children, and they were all young, and the special needs little guy, we made every Sunday morning from 10 to 12, 10:30 to 12:30 was private time. And although my husband is a rabbi of a very busy synagogue, there were usually unveilings, funerals, unfortunately. He always knew that these things were scheduled for after 12:30. Why? Because for me, that was my love language. And if I didn't fill the tank at those 2 hours, because that's really the only 2 hours I had for ourselves, because my son would go to a special needs program, my other kids were in school, that was my 2 hours. That spoke for me. My husband's language was something else. So he, being the sweet guy that he is, gave me my language, but I also know what his language is. This wife, this wonderful woman who wants the private time with her husband because she probably needs to fill up her love tank, and this is her language, that's great, but it might not be hers. And it could be her husband is feeling stress, because most of our husbands are, most of us are now, during COVID. So many people are unemployed, so many people have been laid off, not sure what's happening with their finances. And for a husband who has a huge responsibility to be able to support his family, this could be tremendously, overwhelmingly painful. So she has to find out what is his language. What does he need to be able to unwind? Is it maybe acts of service? Can she do something for him that will make him feel loved and will take a little bit off of the stress? Is it perhaps physical touch? Has she been intimate with him? Maybe because they're so stressed, they actually haven't been intimate with each other. That is not okay. That is not a healthy relationship. And when the intimacy in the bedroom is stifling or is not happening, it spirals into all other areas of their social emotional, of him at work. We know that there's so many marital challenges happen when the intimacy in the bedroom isn't happening. And most therapists, after their first or second meeting, will say, so how is your intimacy? Because sometimes the problem that happened in the washroom or the problem that's happening in the mailbox, or they're not getting their check, is really because there isn't intimacy happening. So maybe the woman who asked the question, which I'm sure she's anonymous, maybe she has to ask these questions. Are the basic needs of her relationship actually taking place? Is there intimacy? Is there words of affirmation? Is she thanking him and showing her gratefulness and her gratitude that he's going to work and he's bringing in a parnasa? Is she making him feel complete? Is she making him feel whole? And if not, maybe that's why he's clamming up and feeling stressed, because he doesn't want to talk to her, because maybe when she talks, she's harassing him. And I don't want to say this about this woman because I don't know who she is, but in so many relationships, when the woman opens our mouth, when we open our mouth, because we spoke about last time that we do have the gift of communication, right? We have the 9 levels of speech that God created. Is she using those words positively? Is she raising her husband? Is she encouraging her husband, giving him courage? So yes, this is maybe his way of saying, I'm too stressed to go out with you. But if she can go back to the chachmas nashim bansa besa, that it's the wisdom of the woman, the intuition of the woman that builds the home, she has to help, maybe to help with a marriage counselor, maybe to help with a therapist, to try to figure out why is her husband so stiff and so stressful. And maybe she can lighten him up with any of the languages. Maybe it's acts of service. Maybe it's gift giving. Maybe it's, words of affirmation. Maybe it's intimacy. Yeah, maybe the wife is tired when she comes back from mikvah. But if that's her husband's language and he isn't getting it, and so many couples today are so stressful, they're not being intimate for 2, 3, 4 months. That's not natural. That's not natural. So we have to be able to take a deep breath, take care of ourselves, because as women, we are the nurturers, and there's so much we have to give, not just to our children, but to our spouse. And there's a reason, as I said last week, why we are the Akeres Habayis. We are the foundation of the home. We have to nurture ourselves and gain wisdom from our mashpia, from a mentor, from a rebbetzin in your community to help you become strong. Your core is strong, then you can reach out and be that foundation to help your spouse and your children. I hope I answered that okay.
Thank you so much for your wisdom as always, Goldie. I know that it's already 9 o'clock, but I just thought, Pam, since part of your professional practice does include marriage counseling and relationship therapy, specifically relating to married couples and marriage counseling, perhaps you want to just add something to Goldie's words very quickly.
While Goldie was talking, I was actually looking at comments that have been made in the chat, and Annabelle Goldfine put the most beautiful thing in that. I think such a lovely thing to end with, because it just really speaks to everything that we've spoken about tonight. She wrote, "The space between the couple is the playground of the children." So I think that there's nothing to say that adds anything more than, you know, you can feel the music of that, you know, that when there is that beautiful space between a couple. And I think it's hard to achieve, you know. I think that, you know, what you were talking about, Goldie, is the aspirational space. But in reality, I think those giving of the words of affirmation, the creation of intimacy, all of those things are very, very hard for couples to achieve sometimes when they are stuck. And it's sometimes, you know, like two porcupines coming together with good intention. And as they get close, so the prickles come out, and so they spike each other and hurt each other without meaning to. And I suppose I go back to what I said in the beginning, that unless we have the EQ skills to know and name our feelings, to hear the other person, to manage what we see in other people and ourselves, you know, these moments are very hard to overcome with just the recipe of kindness and love, you know, when in the truth of it, we haven't achieved that foundation. So, you know, I love the aspect that you're coming from, and I wish it for all of us. I just feel that we have to build it on the foundation that allows it to be felt by people in a way that they really, really want to give that, both to themselves, to their children and their partners. So thank you for the beautiful opportunity of being here tonight, and I wish us all connection.
Amen.
Thanks so much for that. I'm sure we could go on for much longer. I see there are some questions we haven't managed to answer, so I'm really sorry about that, but it is 9 o'clock and we all have relationships to go and nurture. So thank you everybody for signing in. Goldie, thank you once again for making time for us. I know that you have so many balls to juggle, and it's just always such a privilege to hear from you. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Pam, so wonderful to have you on this forum. Fegi, Iti, and everybody else who organized this, thank you very much. And just a reminder that this week, next time, we'll be hearing much more from Javi Brook, who was on the panel earlier, about her own personal journey. So good night, everybody. Thank you for signing in, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.